let me talk to you, let you know about our panel here. And so, Mr. Terry Brown, will you tell me who you are, your family, where you come from, how many years you've done all of this, and then I'll talk about the rest of the panel because he's the only one that did not send me a bio, you know.
Because
He
I
broke
am
out
a
his
because
glasses.
I am a bio.
You're a walking bio.
I'm a walking bio. My name is Terry Brown, and I am the outreach director and also prayer care. I help with prayer care under Pastor Chris. I've been going here really, it'll be about 20 years, 22 years. And, currently right now in my role, I do quite a bit. And, and I'm really out in the community. That's kind of one of the main things that I have. I came from UPS, so I was a UPS district HR manager. And one thing I did was I was always meeting with people in the community, whether it was Congressman John Fortenberry, who I met with for 3 years every 3 months, or if it was some other civic leader or situation. So I've been on both sides of a lot of legislative stuff and working with issues down at the NAACP. So I think that's kind of where a lot of my strength comes from.
So Terry, tell me a little bit about, are you married? How many kids? How long did you work at UPS?
Yeah, I worked at UPS for 28 years. I have an awesome wife. We've been married 38 years this year.
Ooh.
So yeah, give it up.
Yeah.
Anybody that can put it with me for 38 years deserves an applause. And I have 3 kids and 2 grandkids.
Great. So on this side, closest to me, we have Officer Johnny Palermo Jr., and he was born in the Bronx from Puerto Rican parents. And I know Officer Johnny Palermo, BC, that's before Christ. So we know a little bit of extra dirt. No, he's not. He swore an oath not to say anything about me before Jesus. So he moved to Omaha, Nebraska when it's his senior year at high school to kind of escape the violence in the neighborhood in New York. And he served in the Marines for 5 years, and he's been in the Omaha Police Department for 18 years. Currently, he works as a detective in the assault unit. He has three kids, Leah, who's 17, Johnny, 16, and Angelo, 15. And he's a president of NLPOA, the Omaha chapter, which is the National Latino Peace Officers Association. And also, they help start an organization, a program called PACE, which is Police Athletics through Community Engagement, and it serves over 6,000 youth in our city. All right? We have, right next to him, we have Demetrius Folks, a.k.a. D, and D has attended Good News Church in 2007 and is served in several different ministry, children's ministry, M&A youth ministry, prayer team, small group leader, and has coached in JBQ teams. He retired from the Air Force after 21 years and currently works in the Air Force as a civilian, and he's married to Elizabeth and has 2 children, Adara and Miles. Then we already heard from Terry. Then we have Amy Gatewood, and Amy is a 42 years old, and that's very brave that you put your age out there, woman. I love it, Amy. So Amy is a 42-year-old African-American woman born and raised in Omaha, Nebraska. Her birth mother is white, and her birth father is Nigerian, and she was adopted at 2 days old, and both her adopted parents are white. She has 2 older brothers that are white, and an older sister that is Korean, and a young sister that is African-American. So she has all the colors in the rainbow there. She's been a purchasing agent and safety director at a manufacturing company for 22 years, and she's been married for 17 years with 2 sons. All right, and right at the end, we have Mr. Rushton Gunther, and Rushton is a native of Omaha. He has lived in North Omaha most of his life, but I know that he travels some because he was in the military as well. Grew up with a single-parent home. His mother raised 1 daughter and 7 sons as a single mother. That's a champion right there, brother. As he attended school in the community and then church, and he graduated from high school in the mid-'70s, and immediately after graduation joined the military with the U.S. Marine Corps, and After that, he was discharged from the military, and he got his bachelor's degree in consumer science, followed by a master's degree in social work. And he's been working slash serving slash ministering to public schools for 16 years. So that is our panel tonight. We're going to begin by giving them about roughly 10 minutes. I'm going to say it loosely because some of us understand that some could talk a little more, like somebody on this panel that I said 6:15 and 6 o'clock and showed up at 6:30. Why are you looking over there? Everybody. Anyway, so you have about 10 minutes. Terry, I would like you to start. And so the question is this. Number one, how are you processing everything that's going on as an African-American man? And then we'd like to hear perhaps an experience that you had in your life.
Well, I shared a little bit of this on the live stream last night. I've been processing it with my family, and I think the sad part about it, the difficult part about it is the conversations that I've had with my boys who are in their 20s now are conversations we've had so many times. This issue that happened, with George Floyd, and also the gentleman jogging just 2-3 weeks ago and was murdered jogging in a neighborhood, has brought back a lot of conversation. And what I'm realizing is, as we've been processing this generation, or at least my boys right now, they admire what Martin Luther King has done, but they're looking at what Martin Luther King has done as for that day. And they're saying, what about our day? Because some of the things that Martin Luther King believed in, nonviolence, is how he died, very violent way. So they look at some of those things that have happened a little bit differently than what I do. They're appreciative of it, but they're saying, this is our time. This is our generation's time to make a change. You guys have had your shot, and we want to go out and do what we need to do without doing any type of violence, to start changing what needs to change right now. So it's been very interesting. Predominantly most of my boys' friends are white. And I've just explained to them there are some logistical things and some things you have to do. And I live in Papillion. And so, if you get stopped by the police, they know, my boys know, you put 2 hands on the wheel or you roll the window down and you put your 2 hands out. You have to do that. Your friends may not have to do it, but you have to do that. So that's how we've been processing it. As far as just issues you said are examples, I've got so many. Thank God, God keeps us. I think one of the toughest things that I probably ever dealt with was the fact that, when I was dating my wife, I later found out, and she's white, that her parents probably would not agree with it. And so right away I got with my pastor and I said, hey, I'm dating her. We just started dating. And he said, hey, you need to go and, get permission. So I remember going to get permission. I was going to her house. I got ready. Back then I had a nice big afro. And it didn't help. I probably had an afro and drove up in a white Monte Carlo. That might not have been a good sign. So, but I did. And as I pulled up, we had prayed about it. And I remember pulling up to their driveway, and my wife was leaning up against the garage, and her dad was standing out in the driveway with his fist just clenched. Her dad was. And I pulled up, got out, and I said, my name's Terry Brown. I went to go shake his hand. He wouldn't shake my hand. And I said, I'm here to ask permission to date your daughter, and I also want to apologize because I found out that you may not approve of this. And so basically he told me that she had a choice to make. She could go to the church that we were going to. At that time, it was a large church in Bellevue. And then that she could move out if she wanted to continue to go to the church and also date me. Or, or she can stay home and never go to the church and never see me again. And I said, okay. And then he looked at me, and here's exactly what he said. He said, so here's what I want you to do. I want you to back that car out of my driveway so I can wash the driveway down. And it was at that point, even with prayer, grounded in prayer, that I thought, Lord, maybe this isn't going to happen. And it was probably 3 years later that Cindy moved out with some girls. We got some counseling through our leaders, and now she was out of the home where we started the date. But it took her parents 4 to 5 years. Even after we were married, they didn't come to the wedding. And then after we did get together, the interesting thing was her parents and I began to build this relationship, and her mother had a one-to-one talk with me, and she says, I need to explain to you where I come from. I came from the deep woods of Arkansas, a little town named Sycamore, and she says, the best way for me to describe what I've been raised in is this, and exactly how she put it. She goes, every dog in town that is black gets one name, and that's the N-word. We don't name it Fluffy, Muffin. That's what we name every black dog in this town. And so she said that's where she came from. And it took about 15 years before we were able to really turn her heart, and she started coming here and going to church and started worshiping with us. But it was a pretty tough hoe there for a while. But what I've learned is, you know what, God can change people's hearts, and God can keep you.
Thank you, Terry. So, man, such a difficult experience, right? And you know, and your kids, your boys, and your daughter being biracial, they face a different set of circumstances, right? I would like to ask you, because perhaps some people do not understand why you tell your boys that if the police stops them to put their hands on the dashboard, on the steering wheel, or out of the window and lower the windows. Why do you do that?
Well, I do it because from a safety perspective, I've seen too many young black men get shot, beat up, or whatever. And a lot of times you don't know the story. You know, I was looking at the funeral today with George and Floyd, and it was very powerful. But I thought to myself, there's hundreds or thousands of things like that happen every day that are never recorded, that you do not see. And it's in this city, it's in all the cities, it's in small towns, it's wherever. You don't see it. You know, this one was big because we all saw it. And I know those things happen. I've seen those things happen. You know, I've been a place in Colorado where we were camping out, and the KKK came after us while we were camping out. I've seen that. I've lived it, and I breathed it. So I do it to let my boys know you've got to protect yourself and do things right.
Yeah. Thank you, Terry. From next, I would like to ask Mr. Demetrius Folks, how are you processing what's going on and everything that you're seeing in our community and across America?
Can you hear me? Is this thing on?
It is on.
I'm loud anyway. I don't know. I think when we started watching the images of, it started with me with, especially recently, with Ahmaud Arbery. And I don't really, at least for the sake of the conversation here, to get into the why he was where he was, what was he doing. To me, that didn't matter at the time. That murder to me was senseless. The man didn't need to die for whatever it is that they assumed that he was doing. And it took me a while to process that because I was upset at the fact that, you know, they called 911, but they didn't let 911, they didn't let the police officers do their job. Now, I don't know how it would have turned out anyway, but they didn't let the police do their job, and that didn't need to happen. With George Floyd, I think I was outraged as well as I'm sure everybody in this room was outraged to witness that. And so these latest incidents for me, just like Brother Terry here said, I had to have conversations with my children, and I've got a 10 and a 7-year-old. Conversations that, I may get a little, I'm a crybaby, everybody says that in my family. I've had to have conversations with my kids that I was hoping to not have for a while. I think many of us say we want to keep our kids, have them have their innocent view of this world for as long as possible because the time will come when the ugliness will rear its head. And we figure we can deal with it when they're a little older. But we had to have conversations about the hate in people's heart. So that's kind of how we've been processing it. And then the other issue that was just social media. Again, I think I'm guilty of spending probably more time on there than I should. But you get involved, you see conversations, and you just see a lot of divisiveness and hate. And I'm like, how do we get that to stop? How do we get to be able to talk like we're doing here, have a conversation, and recognize that there are people that are angry, people that are hurt, people that have been wronged, people that have suffered under injustice. And just because many, myself included, maybe not have seen what you've gone through doesn't mean that has not taken place. And how do we get into a place where we're a little bit empathetic to what people have gone through, maybe try to understand, maybe not be so quick with responses of, well, had he not been doing this, this wouldn't have happened. Had he not been doing that, this wouldn't have happened. You play silly games, you get silly results. I mean, you see a lot of things like that. A lot of jumping to conclusions without having complete evidence, or let's not rush to judgment when some police have done something. Let's not rush to judgment. Let's wait for the full story to come out. But you didn't pass judgment on the victim. You didn't want to wait till the full story came out on what they did or what they didn't do. So, I don't know. That's how we've been processing. I've been trying to process it with my family because I've kind of been forced to right now. So they're getting an education a little earlier than what I really wanted them to. As far as some experiences that I have, I'm biracial myself. My mom's a Greek. My dad's black. He's from Baltimore. My mother's from Athens. Probably didn't have the same experience as many have because I grew up in a military family. So we traveled around a lot, and we're surrounded. I mean, it looked like the room out here. We're surrounded by people from everywhere. And then I served for 21 years in the military. And we didn't get to choose who we worked with. I mean, you probably could choose who you hang out with, but you pretty much hung out with the people that you worked. So, I mean, we were just forced to work together, and you were forced to work out your issues together. Didn't get along with everybody, but you got along. And if there were issues regarding race, well, especially recently, I mean, there are mechanisms in place to make sure that that doesn't continue. So, I mean, I think we might have grown up in a little bit of a bubble due to where I worked and how I was raised. But that wasn't exempt from any experiences. I've had a couple that kind of stood out to me. Once traveling to Georgia, driving through a small town in Alabama, OPP, Alabama. A couple of my buddies needed gas, went to a small town gas station, and the man came out, the elderly gentleman, came out and said, "You boys don't want no gas here. Go on now." My buddy, I had to put my hand on his chest and go, "Thank you, sir." And we got it and left because that man, he looked like the stereotypical of what I thought. I'm like, he's done some things in the past that he's probably pretty comfortable doing. And I don't want to mess with this guy, so we limped on to another gas station until we found out we were able to get the gas that we needed. Just a couple other ones, but certainly not. They don't rise to the level of what we've seen. But I agree with you. I mean, these things are going on around this country daily that aren't being recorded. The thing I guess I want to get out of these conversations that we have here is I'm not so interested about president, legislative kind of stuff. I'm more interested in the people. I read something here. I know us as believers, let me try to, because I wrote this down because I thought it was pretty cool, about why we should talk these things through. Where was it? It basically said that, I'll get to it sometime. I had it written down. But anyway, I'm not interested in legislation, the president, the governor, the mayor. I'm interested in people. How can we reach out and have these conversations and get to understand people and stop saying things like the thing that I hate saying is I'm colorblind. I hate that term. Let's recognize and see all the different colors that are here and talk to each other, understand each other, understand what makes us different, and I think that's just the beginning, and then how can that spread? Yeah. But I'm not so interested that much in what presidents and other leaders have to say because they're not going to fix this for us. They're just not. It's going to be us.
Yeah. You made a comment, and and I'm going to give you guys an opportunity later on. We need to think through the perspective of the church and as brothers and sisters in Christ. How do we approach this, right? So we're talking about experiences. We're talking about your perspective right now. You made a comment, D, when you said about that experience in that gas station, that gentleman looked like the stereotype of somebody that had perhaps done something in the past that he could very easily do again, right? So what do you think that is?
Oh, that's a bias. Oh, that's that. Yes, yes, and yes. That's a bias. He fit the picture
that you
what
had.
I've seen.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was a bias.
So the reason why I'm asking you that question is because many of us do that every day. When you encounter somebody that fits a certain profile that you think, right, that this person may be a threat or may judge you in a certain way. So thank you for saying that and for being transparent, D. Miss Amy, you care to tell us a little bit? Man, I love to hear a little bit about your family too. That's pretty awesome. It's like a super melting pot. And I know that you are mixed as well, just like D is. And so that is a kind of like a different complexity, if you will, because if I talk to some Latinos that grow up in the United States and perhaps don't speak Spanish, then they're not accepted in their community because they're not white, and then they're not accepted as a Latino because they don't speak Spanish. So you guys are like, you grew up with a white family, but then you don't look like them, but then being accepted as an African American woman and so on. So
it's different. It's easier for me to give that side and think of my perspective on what's going on. Raised in a predominantly white neighborhood, went to predominantly white schools. My experience from a very young age was coming in contact with people, neighbors, people at school. The white kids didn't want to accept me. The black kids didn't know what to think of me. I've been continually made fun of for my speech. I mean, from a very young age.
what do you mean your speech?
I talked white.
Okay.
They always said that I talked white.
Can you? Okay, I need somebody to talk black. So no. I am serious because this is something that sometimes I think escapes us. Does anybody in here want to talk like, a little bit? Anybody? I'm talking to the audience. Like, anybody want to say a few lines? No? Nobody's don't want to do that? Okay. Because, just in case, somebody doesn't understand, what does that mean? That
Basically,
you sound what?
I didn't use the slang back in the day. I mean, if you get me riled up enough, I've been, I lived in down north for a long time too. So you catch me on the right day, you could probably get me riled up.
Yeah.
My sons have seen sides of me that they never thought were there. But it's just this, it's speaking and articulating. My sons go through the same thing. Going to school, they'd come home and they'd been asked questions, why don't you act more black? Why don't you sound more black? And it's like, that's not the way they were raised. My sons, they're belt boys, if that makes any sense. Sagging was not tolerated in my home. It's, if you wanted to get in trouble real quick, that's one way to do it. Just because I just don't think it's respectable, But back to me, it was tough from grade school, junior high, high school. A lot of times they just don't know how to take you, and so from there they make fun of you, they bully you, they leave you out. I want to say one of the boldest memories I remember was in the neighborhood, because it's really easy to blame the black girl too if something goes wrong. I went to a neighbor's house. We were all friends, and one of the older sisters was complaining about she had lost somebody stole her bottle of nail polish. And I was probably 8, 7. Somebody had stolen her bottle of nail polish. And when we all got to this house, they just assumed that since I'd been in the house at some time, I was the one that stole the nail polish. So everybody went in, and they didn't let me in. So I basically had to walk all the way up the street by myself, trying to, you know, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? I had to work that out in Ultimate Journey. That was a that was a letter. But yeah, but then as you get older, it still happens. You know, it's more random where, and I never grew up believing that with living in that neighborhood or being raised in a white family, I knew that when I got older that my race was going to come into play, but I wasn't going to let it define me. And I basically, from, you know, you make a decision and I think you take things from a different perspective, you know, moving forward. I remember walking down the street. I used to walk to Shopco, and I was walking alone, and out of nowhere, a truck drives by, and it was a truck full of white guys, and they spit at me. They missed because, you know, that's the Holy Spirit working. Yeah. But still, there was absolutely no reason for it, but they still did it. And I guess, I don't know, you know, I could have let a lot of things define me, but I chose not to, especially when it comes to race. There's so many other things, you know? And then you've got your filter, you know, as you become a believer and you're born again, the filter changes. So if you cut to what's going on in the world right now, I'm looking at it from two sides. I'm looking at it from being African American. I have sons that are African American. I've had to have the talk with them about the steering wheel, and you know, that was the talk they got before the sex talk. What do you do when you get pulled over? You know, and it's sad. But I'm also looking at what's going on in the world from the police's point of view, because I've got a lot of police officers that are friends that I care about, and I'm sitting there and I'm watching them on the news. And yes, there are bad seeds. There are in any of our jobs, there's people that don't do a good job, that really should go. But that doesn't necessarily believe they're going to go. But when everything broke out here, I'm looking at police officers that are basically getting bottles thrown at them, you know, getting screamed at. And I'm like, I don't understand it. It's like the police officers that I have come in contact with that I know, some of them can't even talk about what happened to Floyd without crying because they can't believe that the other officers didn't stop it, you know, or that officer was the way, you know, handled things the way he did. But I also don't believe that evil's not going to cancel out evil. And getting fired up and rage and vengeance doesn't get anybody anywhere.
Amen. Thank you so much, Amy. A mother of African American young men. You know, how do you pray for them? As a mother that sees all of this going on in our communities.
I don't want them to take away from this thinking that I don't want them, I pray for them in a way that they can be their own person and be able to see the truth in everything. Right now we're dealing with a lot of children that think they know everything because they saw it on TV or they saw it on social media. That's one of the things that really does save me. I limit the amount of TV and social media that I come in contact with. I wait for the important stuff to really start to come out. I don't let everybody push me one way or the other way because, I mean, that's just wasted energy. But no, I mean, even with all of this going on, I just pray for godly sons, you know, that stand up for themselves in the world, that understand that Jesus Christ died for them, and that's what they are supposed to be taking out into the world, and that's what people are supposed to be saying. When I looked at the news on top of everything else, going out evangelizing on Saturdays with our groups and stuff like that, I looked at the crowds and I was like, we've got a lot of work to do. We still have a lot of ground to cover.
Thank you, Amy. And you talked about police officers, and you know, it's it's a difficult topic, right? Because as Pastor Jason said this weekend, you can't stand for someone without somebody else then pointing the finger at you and saying, well, if you're standing for that person, then you're against me, and and so that it shouldn't be that way, like, right? And so we got Johnny Palermo here, and Officer Palermo is in the force and also being a man of color. So Amy talked about how the yelling and the screaming and the throwing stuff, and I know that you were out there this weekend, and so kind of give us your perspective then of this situation, everything that's happening, everything that you've encountered, and if you have any experience of I'm pretty sure you have experience from being a police officer, but also being a man of color. How has that impacted your life, and what experiences have you had?
It was funny listening to her talk. She said something like she lived over north, and I was in a briefing not too long ago, and can you hear me? Is this good? Hello? Okay. You got COVID, bro?
You can get sick.
I'm just kidding. So I was in a briefing. We have these meetings with the deputy chief and the higher command. We talk about felony assaults and how we can battle these felony assaults. Okay. And so I was talking to my briefing, and I was like, yeah, this kid. He said that he was over north, and I listened. I heard this guy. He was sitting to the left of me, and he was like, yeah, that's ghetto. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I was like, how's that ghetto? Because north is up. So they're saying that only ghetto people say over north. But I was like, what? And I heard you say that, and it brought that back to me. And I was like, but this past weekend, and man, this is the craziest stuff I've ever seen in my life. I was angry. I was confused, really confused, because my 18 years as a police officer, I believe that giving is like one of my things I like to do. I love to give, and I give back to the community. I'm currently the president of the Latino Peace Officers Association, so we give back to the community a lot. And I thought we had a great relationship with the community, and as police officers, and to see the hate, and it was all colors. It wasn't just blacks. It wasn't whites. It was everybody. Indian. I mean, it was everybody just hating on us. And I seen faces in there, and like, I know that guy. You know what I mean? And he's just like, F the police. He can't see me. I got a gas mask on. I got a helmet. They said I look like the dude from Spaceballs. The big helmet. This guy was like, F you. There was this cursing at me, and I'm like, why you hate me so much? But then he's like, that dude look like Spaceballs. I'm like, oh man, that got me. I'm probably more mad about that than anything else. But I'm gonna start off on 72nd Street, the peaceful protest, and I believe in what they were protesting. I loved it. I think what happened in Minnesota was horrible, but the peaceful protesters didn't see were people with the Molotov cocktails filling up behind Petco and spray painting, hateful stuff on property that was there. And that's when we had to react. We had officers in sniper positions, and they thought that was an overkill. But they were pointing out the troublemakers. They were like, all right, there's a car over here, and they're throwing out rocks. They're actually handing out book bags full of rocks to throw at us. The peaceful protesters, they were awesome, but I say about 40% of the people that showed up to wreak havoc, and we saw that part. So we're making arrests behind buildings. They're breaking out windows of 72nd Street. They tried to take out Target. They took out 76th Street. They broke out, I think, 12 businesses, windows. I mean, Buffalo Wild Wings. Buffalo Wild Wings didn't do nothing to nobody. They broke out all their windows, and I was like, oh man, this is crazy. So this is Saturday, and we get done. And I'm having one-on-one talks. We're getting people out of there. There's CS gas everywhere. I'm trying to tell people to leave. And I try to ask God, how can he use me in this situation, And these guys are like, you guys got to leave. This is a peaceful presentation. I like protest. And I was like, well, once, the crime element starts, we got to move. And me and him get into a little, I'm wiping my gas mask off because it was fogging up. And me and him started talking to each other, and it was a white male. He looked like a biker guy, and he was like, you can't make me move. I was like, yeah, I can, but, man, just leave, man. Don't make this harder than what it is. And he's like, then he goes, you're just here for the overtime. I'm like, nah, well kind of, yeah, but And he's like, oh, you pretty cool, huh? And I'm like, man, I understand what you guys are doing. If you're one of the peaceful guys, I stand with you, but you got to go. Then after a while, he just came over and gave me a hug, and I thought that was pretty cool. And then I thought we were done for the day until they were like, hey, there's people going downtown to police headquarters. So everybody gets in their cars, and we start heading down that way. And that was the craziest thing I've ever saw. It felt like World War III. I show up, and they're throwing artillery shells at us. They're shooting artillery shells at the police headquarters. And there's about, I don't know, it seemed like hundreds and hundreds of people standing around on 14th Street, 14th and Howard, and they're trying to break out the windows of the police station. And then, we have the sheriffs. They came with this big old tank, and they're shooting CS gas, and people just so much hate, so much hate. One thing I do remember was of a white girl, a young white lady, and a young black girl. They had their hands up the whole time, and they're standing right in front of me. And they could protest all day long, but they don't know who I am. I don't know who they are. But they were the most, peaceful people. They were just they wanted to make a change, and they kept on stopping other people from cursing at me. Like, don't curse at him. He ain't do nothing to you, But they wanted to make a point. What's right is right. What's wrong is wrong. And
Why did you pay attention? So they were peaceful,
Right.
and they were telling other people not to curse at you.
Right.
So that did something to you
Right.
as a person.
Right. I told them, I said, I believe what you're doing, I told them. And then once I was sitting there, like, God, how do you use me in this situation with these girls, And I got, cops all over me, right around me, and I'm in the front. And once I started, talking to them and being like, hey, I understand why you guys are here, I understand what you're doing, but I just want to make sure you're safe. And then the other cops started speaking up and be like, hey, guys, you might not want to go down over here, you might not, they started speaking back, and I think cops were scared because, we're humans too, though, and so it's like Police Academy. You ever seen Police Academy? All those characters, we got all those characters in the police department, man. We got the cool cops, we got the really gun-ho cops, we got the guys, why are you talking to them, man, but we got all those characters, man, but I think they're scared too. They were scared also. You can see it in their eyes, like, man, what's going on, this community. And then we were there when Skurlock got shot. I was about 10 feet, 15 feet away from him. And that was the craziest. That was just added to the problem. Everything just seemed to escalate after that. My best friend, Dan Torres, he's a child of God also. He was the one that was giving, CPR, rendering CPR on him. And just to be around that whole, people would just thinking we shot him, They were like, oh, man, you guys shot this guy. And then I was trying to get the fire trucks in, and this white girl, she just starts yelling at me. She's like, spits on me, and she's like, what are you trying to get the fire trucks to, shoot us with water? And I'm like, man, this guy got shot. I got to get him out. And she's like, you shot him? Oh, he complete. And then she starts yelling about the cops being, racist and whatnot. But when I left that morning, about 3:30 in the morning, I looked at downtown. I just drove by a couple times, and I was like, all the businesses were just broke up. And I was like, how does that make sense, So I didn't even sleep that night, just thinking about just the havoc that was downtown and all the businesses and whatnot, and this kid losing his life, So it was tough. It was tough. I had some conversations. I got kids, and they're pretty well rounded, So I talked to them. I was like, hey, man, don't go downtown. First off, don't go downtown. Stay away from all that, because you could be there for peace, because they believe in the same thing, But I told them, don't go downtown because you might end up getting shot. You never know, So
Yeah. So Johnny, you share a little bit of your experience and everything that's going on, this recent event, and as a police officer, what you encounter, So it sounds like you're encountering the hate, but you're also encountering the peaceful protesters that are actually wanting to make a difference. And as a police officer, like you said if crime shows up, then we got to move. We got to act on it, right? Because that's what you're sworn to do. As a man of color, without the badge, without your uniform on, Have you ever had an experience, because you just talked to us about your experience as being a man in uniform.
Right.
And like you said, some of the people that were not peacefully protesting, you knew who they were,
Right.
but they can't see you because you
Right.
got, and I know this guy because everywhere we go, and even people here at the church, they see him and like, hey, Johnny. I'm like, dude, you know half of Omaha. Like, everybody knows you. So, but now without the uniform on, have you ever had experiences of people treating you differently because of the color of your skin?
Oh yeah, I started experiencing, I say, prejudice in my own family. When I was the darkest one in the family, my mom was like, "Man, God burned one when He had you." But I remember hearing that, when I was a kid, and I'm the darkest one in the family. Puerto Ricans, we're mixed with a bunch of different cultures and whatnot. And I had Dominican friends, and for some reason, they didn't like wearing socks. And I remember not wearing socks for a while. My mom's like, "What? You want to be Dominican or something?" But that's the fun stuff. But as a man of color, I was when I first, I don't know, I was first police officer. I became a cop. I'm driving around like, I don't know, Regency, and I'm in a cruiser, and I'm kind of short, so I guess they couldn't see my uniform. They called on me and said I stole a police car. I said, "What?" They're like, "Johnny, Palermo, you driving car 184? I'm like, "Yeah." Okay, they said that somebody stole a police car. But no, there's been several times, especially, I don't know if there's any Bellevue officers here. I seem to get pulled over every day in Bellevue. Every day I get pulled over. I got pulled over one time with my daughter, and he said I was doing 36 and a 35. And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then I got a little thing. I always carry my my duty weapon on me. So I just let him know. I was like, "Hey, I got my duty weapon with me." And then he goes, "Oh, you're a police officer?" And he's like, all right, get out of here." Just stuff like that. So it's crazy. And one time, me and my partner, and I don't know, Dan Torres pretty well, and he does undercover work, and he does long hair, and he's tatted up and stuff. And we're driving a minivan. It's like a Honda Odyssey, and we're driving it, and this police car pulls up right next to us. And I got my hat backwards. I think I had some Yankee hoodie on or something. And we're actually working. We're working. And I'm driving, and the plates on the car, usually cop cars that are used, they don't have any registration. He ran the plate, but he figured it was a minivan until he pulled up right next to us. And he looked both of us, and he seen us in the car. He slowed down, pulled us over, and he thought we stole the car. He's like, "You guys got registration for this?" We're like, "No." And he wanted to get us out. And even after we told him we were police officers, he still put us in cuffs, and it was the craziest experience we had. So I was upset, and I was like, "Man, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, if you're law enforcement or not. There's they're out there. There's 10% of us that are probably shouldn't be where we're at, So I think that's in society, though, because we only deal with like 10% of the population when it comes to crime.
Yeah.
So
Thank you, Johnny. Thank you for being transparent, man. Appreciate it. All right. Well, Mr. Rushton, we left the best for last. Doing a lot of work in the community here, especially in North Omaha. So how are you processing? And I know that you have kids, you talk to kids, you mentor young men and things like that. So how are you processing all of this? What are you telling them? And perhaps share some quick experiences with us.
Actually, I have really been all over the place emotionally. A lot of conversation with Julie, and the murder of the jogger really woke her up.
And for those of you that don't know, Julie is
My
your
wife.
wife, and
Yep.
she is white.
Yes, Caucasian. And so some time ago, her and I had a conversation, and I told her, when we go out amongst her friends, I'm the only African American in the crowd. And I said, sometimes I just feel in a weird way. And so she told me, she made me feel that was me. So, okay, I kind of stuffed it. But so we processed a lot this week and over the past week. But here's where I landed. I grew up in North Omaha all my life. Lived, ate, slept, went to church, was in there. and wasn't really around Caucasians until I went into the military. And I hear the message, Black Lives Matter. And I've been in a lot of prayer, and this is what keeps coming back. All lives matter. All lives matter, regardless. Even the infant, even the embryo in the womb matters. And growing up in North Omaha, what has hurt me the most about all of this is I've seen more young black boys killed by their peers. No one says anything. Even with cameras, they videotaped. My foster son was videotaped fighting at school, and someone got hurt. No one seemed to matter. But you have a white officer or several white Caucasian guys kill a black guy, and it's the worst thing that could happen. So it's been an up and down week for me, trying to wrap my head around why is it okay for a black boy to kill another black boy, but then when a white officer kills a black man, why do we have to all of a sudden want to be heard? And the other thing where I landed was, okay, we want to be heard. What are we saying, or what do we want people to hear, and how are we communicating this? Because peaceful protesting is being overcovered or being smeared or covered over by looters and mobbers and whatnot. So that's been, a touching point for me as well. And the other thing, another place I had landed was early on, I had shared with Julie that I would prefer to be called an African American and not a black. And I told her because when I am identified as a black person, my identity is minimized. I am grouped in with all other good, bad, and indifferent black people. And what often comes to mind, more often than not, when you say a black person, there's this stigmatism. There's the stigma that comes along with that. So I prefer African American instead of black. That minimizes my story, my journey. So I found my peace in a lot of prayer, in a lot of scripture, and understanding that what's going on really is bigger than us now. It's a spiritual warfare, like it talks about in Romans 6, we wrestle. This isn't about flesh and blood. This is powers and principalities. There are greater things, greater forces that's going on right now. So a lot of time in prayer, a lot of time focusing and just remembering, as a church, we must suffer through this. We must suffer through this. Julie and I had talked about we have to suffer in our call. If we're called to serve the Lord, we need to expect to suffer, and this is part of it. A more personal experience, we moved up in the Keystone area a few years ago. I was walking with my foster son probably about a week ago, and he said, "You're the only African American in this community, right?" I was like, "Yep." No problem. I love it. We're serving the people. We're sharing Jesus in our community. We are connecting with the people. And Rush is really doing most of the work because he's speaking to everybody. And he opens the door for us. But probably we moved in September. And about 3 weeks later, we hit October. And we're taking a walk through the neighborhood. And there was a dummy hung up on a tree. And I stopped, and I told Julie, I said, "You see that?" She was like, "Yeah." And I just kind of smiled. She didn't have a clue what I saw it as. And when I was young, and you moved in the neighborhood, and you saw a dummy hanging up on the tree, that was like, you need to get out of this neighborhood, right? In the late 60s and early 70s, if you saw that, that meant you need to leave this neighborhood. And so we walked, and so I told her later, I said, you know, I got this feeling come over me when I saw that. I know it isn't, let's say it's a Halloween decoration. And so I said, let's see what they do next year. The next year, it wasn't there. And so maybe somebody talked to the neighbor and said, you know, maybe you shouldn't do that. But it really struck a chord in me. And she didn't quite get it, but her and I continue to have those conversations about relationship and our culture, our differences in culture.
That's good. That's really good. Thank you, Rushton. And, you know, some of you have mentioned, you know, being a biracial couple, and I love the fact that you're transparent enough to talk to us about your interaction with Julie and how you guys are processing things that she doesn't see and perhaps things that you have lived. And so, you know, you're doing it in your own home, right? How have you been able to navigate through that as a biracial couple, especially when you guys were living in North Omaha? Is there some difficulties? What are the difficulties that you guys have encountered through that?
The greatest difficulty, I believe, was when we were in North Omaha. It was harder for her to adjust because she said she had never visited North Omaha. You know, I love North Omaha. It's my city. I call it, whenever I drive down there, I say, we're getting ready to go into the bowels of Omaha. You know, that's just me. It's an inside joke. But she had a hard time. She struggled with that. But she adapted. She got out. She walked by herself many a times when Rush was born, connected with the neighbors, and her perspective about African Americans began to change, right? And so when we moved over to Keystone, it was the same thing. You know, what are the neighbors going to think? You know, we look around, I'm the only African American guy in the neighborhood or the only black guy in the neighborhood. You know, people were nice. They were nice. I mean, being in the military, you get used to it. You have to, because you're counting on the person that might be of a different skin color from you to save your life.
Yeah.
So it was an adjustment on both ends, her in North Omaha and me in Keystone.
Good. Thank you so much. So now we're moving into phase 2, correct?
I did want to say a couple of things. So a couple of years ago, I was able to be on a race panel and got to meet some of the pastors in our city, some of the stories they tell. And there was one in particular, and if I mentioned his name, you would know who it is. He's pretty prominent. And he said when his dad was growing up, not growing up, he was a grown man, that whenever he was in the presence of a white kid, he was expected to call that white kid sir. And the way that affected not only his dad, but then how it affected him and the way he was raised and thinking like that. And then Hook, I don't know if you know Pastor Hooker from BCC, talked about how his mom, just because of the way she was treated, she just said, you're not going to be able to trust white people, Hook. You're not going to be able to trust them. And he's like, Mama, they love me. I'm a pastor to them. It's not the same as it used to be. But what you have is generational stuff on all of our sides. The way we process the bias in our heart, some of that stuff has been by experiences, but some of that stuff we learned, we've been taught, the way we perceive, the biases in our heart. And God helps us to work through this stuff, but sometimes we're not even aware of it, and we make unconscious decisions based on things that are in our heart that have been part of us for a long time. So I was processing, and I've been, just a lot of comments and a lot of sides, 360 degrees of opinions on everything. And this is the first time I think that I've ever been a Christian. We'll probably talk about a little bit on Sunday, that I actually went, God, I don't know that we can do this. I don't know that things are really going to change. And it's not because it can't, but how divided people are and how many opinions and how people automatically, it's already, the event has happened, but now everybody's gone back to their talking points, that I wonder if we can actually change. So I was trying to really, how do I communicate what I feel like the Lord is wanting to communicate about the African American experience? And I can't know that, but I'm trying to go, how can I explain this? Because I've heard so many stories of people telling me things. And this is the best way that I think I can explain it. Caleb was diagnosed with diabetes a number of years ago. And we're able to use Dexcom. We have access to insulin. We're able to get up with him, in the morning. And we have access to things that a lot of people never have. And people are like, man, isn't that awesome that you're able to look on your phone and see what his blood sugar is? But in my heart, I go, but he's still diabetic. And many people in the African American community, they go, it's getting better and it's gotten better, but we still experience what we experience. And most of us that don't experience that, we can't identify with that. I'm not here just to speak about one side. I'm just telling you, we've got to begin to understand people in our community and hear their story and be able to talk about it. So let's move to session 2. Thank you guys for sharing your story. And here's what we want to do. We want to actually have conversation. So tell your story in here, process some of this information, and thank you again for sharing.
All right.